Okay, good morning. My name is Greg and I'm going to do a series of videos on lantern restoration. What I have here is a common Dietz Monarch lantern. It's a little rusty, good candidate for a restore, custom paint job, whatever you want to do with it. First thing obviously you want to do is empty out all the fuel that's in the tank and then inspect it with a nice bright LED lamp. This one looks pretty darn good. It's got a lot of tin plating in there, a little rust in the seams, so it doesn't look too bad. Next step is to get all the kerosene and residue out, and what I use, I squirt full acetone here, a little bit in there, and then put the cap back on and give her a good shake just to get that residual kerosene loosened up in there. You might have to soak the fount or use some sort of metal prep or something in there to clean it if it's full of dried gunk and whatever. So then you just empty the old acetone out and dispose of it in an environmentally friendly way. Now we're going to start the disassembly. First thing to do is remove the globe. This is our pinch lift. Pull up on this thing here and just tip the old globe out, put it in a safe spot where you won't break it. Run the lantern lift up all the way. Of course, you lantern gurus already know how to do all this stuff, removing the burner, the wick, everything. That's all going to get stripped, sandblasted, and re-zinc plated. Go ahead and pull a wick out. Handle. Yeah, basically bend in on the handle just enough to get the hook out. Sometimes you got to work with these things. They aren't easy, and sometimes they pop right out. So you get her on the hook there. And this side will just come right out since the other side is out. There's your handle, that's off. Right globe lift plate, just drop it back down here. Pull these two hooks out and get her off of there and pull it off the arm, and there you go. That's disassembled there. Now we have a disassembled lantern and it's ready for further progress on the project here. Again, this one looks pretty darn good. Let it dry out real good. I have some stuff here that works good on rust spots in the tank if they're not too bad. The rust is real bad, you got to take a sash chain or some BBs and put it in there with some vinegar or other good rust removal stuff and shake it around and clean it out, make sure it's nice and dry in there. Once it's real dry, and squirt some of this oxfol in there. It converts the rust into a black-like hard substance that's paintable and, you know, inhibits further rust. If the lantern is real bad, well, we got a helper here, a little bead. Then you need to use some Por-15 to seal the fount if it leaks. Okay, on with our project here. Now, if the tank needs sealing, I use this stuff called Por-15. This is in an old mustard bottle with a lid that I sealed with some hot glue gun glue to keep the air out of it so it doesn't harden up. It still develops a hard skin or something, but the stuff on the bottom is good. You pour this in the tank and very carefully put just enough in to the tank to get enough in there to coat it, and then one just carefully, you know, works it around until the inside of the fount is coated. You don't have to coat the upper portion just up to the bottom of the filler neck, because that's where the fuel is. So if you get from here on down and the whole bottom coated inside, then that'll be good enough. That has to dry for a couple of 3 days to let it harden up real good, and then you're good to go there. This lantern now is going to be ready for the glass bead cabinet, in which I will remove all of the rust and paint. The glass bead does real good because it takes it all off, but it's soft enough to where it won't eat away the metal. Now if you do have a really rusty lantern and you blow a couple holes in the fount, well, pour 15 time. Put some tape over the hole and pour 15 in it, coat it, and your hole and leak are gone. And then once you paint it, it won't show. So it depends on the condition of the lantern you're working with. Of course, you want to start with a fairly decent condition lantern. You don't want to get an old rust bucket that you can see daylight through that looks like a piece of Swiss cheese. Okay, the next step in the lantern refinishing process is to block off your fount openings. The center one, get a cork, put it right in there like that, and it seals it up. You can either use a cork in the fuel cap opening, or what I do, I just screw the cap on. That way it gets cleaned along with everything else. Another word on the Austral, you got rust inside your air tubes. You can look down in there and try to peek up in here with a little small fiber optic camera if you have one. Those are real good for inspecting the parts of the lantern you can't see. I don't have one, but I'm planning on getting one. Just squirt some Austral down in here and swish it around in the air tubes, let it dry for 3 or 4 days, and it'll put that black rust inhibiting coating and convert the rust to an inert compound so it can't rust any further. So with that, we're ready to go over and glass bead this lantern and clean her up. Like I say, the cork and the cap will keep the sand out of the fount, because you can blow it out with the air gun, but there's still always enough left in there to gunk things up in the future possibly. So who wants sandy kerosene? Okay, now to the next stage of the cleaning and restoration process. Got this nice Harbor Freight handy dandy glass cabinet here. Works real good. Of course, you can see I've got a nice monster air compressor to power it, which is what you need for something like this, because they use a lot of cubic feet per minute of air. Hooked up with a vacuum dust collector system I rigged up here. I've got headphones because this thing gets noisy. I will film some of the blasting. You won't be able to see the wood through the window because the dust and everything swirling around makes it hard to see anything. But I'll show you the results when I'm done. Now I bought these little handy dandy little puck lights. They got a magnet on the back. They're good for sticking inside the glass cabinet for auxiliary lighting. I've got a fluorescent tube in there rigged up too, so I have plenty of lights. That's what you need, a lot of light from a lot of different angles to get rid of the shadows, so one can see how well the blasting is going. I'll be blasting the lantern body, the globe plate, the bail handle, burner and cone. And what happens is I get all this rust off of here, and then it'll be ready for the next step, which will be for the galvanized parts or zinc plated parts. Although these are tin plated, I zinc plate them, which turns out just as well and maybe a little sturdier. I actually put these in muriatic acid and stripped what's left of the zinc or tin plating off that the blasting didn't get, and then it goes into the plating tank, and that'll be further on in the presentation here. So with that, I'm going to get going. You won't be able to hear me talking, so I'm going to film just a little bit of the blasting operation, and then we'll continue on to the next step, which will be showing the results of this step. Button it up here, and we're ready to go. Go. Okay, I just blasted a little bit of the lantern body here. One can see how well that takes off paint and rust without eating away the metal. Now if there's rust pits, they'll be there, and you'll just have to try to fill the worst ones with a little bit of automotive what they call surfacing putty or paint putty. Here you can see the yellow color. It appears that this lantern was not painted Dietz blue at the factory. I don't see any evidence of blue paint. This is BECO, so maybe Boston Electric, I don't know, or Baltimore. I'll have to look it up on one of the lantern websites to find out what utility this came from. It appears that it was factory painted yellow, so that's the color I'm going to go with. You can see the yellow paint, and if you look closely, the tin plate underneath, which gets dulled by the glass beads and makes an excellent surface for paint adhesion. One thing you don't want to do is let this sit out in any type of moist environment or high humidity, because surface rust will be on there in a heartbeat. That's why once I finish blasting, I get the paint on immediately after I blow any residue or sand off of it with the blowgun, so to protect the metal and get the paint on there. So with that, I'm going to continue to blast and clean this and clean the other parts as well, and then I'll be showing you the finished result, and then we'll move on into the first coat of paint. Okay, the bead blasting is finished. Now what I need to do is shake the excess sand out of this. and get my face shield here, because when I blow it out with compressed air, I don't want to get any sandy grit in my eyes. That's not a good thing to get sandy grit in your eyes. So, gonna clean her out with compressed air. Had to change over airlines. Basically, I'm blasting out all loose sand, and everything has to come out. And that takes care of that. Now what we have here is a bare lantern, down on bare metal. It's nice and clean. The rust spots are off of it. I'm getting a little bit of spotting here on the bottom. These little wet looking spots, there's still a little kerosene in there. You see these rust pits. This lantern's going to have to be pour 15. These are pinholes that show up after one removes the paint. And that's the reason for getting all the paint off. You know, the cleaner the lantern, the better the prep job, the better the paint job. So I'm going to have to paint this and then pour 15 it. I don't want this metal to rust while the pour 15 is drying. So I'm going to paint it. I've got this old 55 tractor and implement paint. It comes from the local Fleet Farm store here. It's a house brand. It's transportation yellow, gloss transport yellow, which is a nice yellow color, and is very, very close to what the original color of this lantern is. But before I can do that, I'll have to spray a coat of gray primer so the paint will adhere nice and look nice when it's done. Well, here we go with the painting. Okay, I'm using this Rust-Oleum 2x2, 2x whatever. Flat gray primer. It's a nice good quality paint, and she'll give a good covering here. So basically I start out just gently feathering the paint on there, you know, just not all at once, just kind of work it on there, making sure to cover all areas. It's kind of tricky because you got to rotate this lantern in all different visible angles to be able to cover every little nook and cranny on them. They are kind of complex in their angles for painting. So it's, as you can see, it's upside down, sideways, and everywhere in between to get these things coated. This one does not appear to have any stampings or any dating or anything, patent numbers on the tube, which means it was produced after 1956 when Dietz quit stamping their production codes and dates on their Monarchs. As you know, the Monarch was one of the lanterns that was not sent to China as far as the tooling goes to be built over there. So these were built here till the end of production whenever Dietz closed their factory in the 70s. So anyway, you just go through and take the time and spritz her all up real good and hit the areas. You know, give it time to dry. This primer flashes off or dries pretty quick. It's automotive grade primer and it works pretty good. As you can see, you gotta work it in, let it dry off. You don't want to put too much on at once. You're going to have sags and runs, and then you got to go back into the cabinet and blast those off once they're dry. So just very carefully working the paint into the lantern. Some of the air chamber got glass beaded, so you got to kind of try to get some of that paint to go down in there, so it just takes little short bursts and that'll be fine. So I built this nice drying rack here. These little wire hooks are nice because I can just hook it right in and hold it, and I don't get my old grubby fingers all over the nice fresh paint job, and I can just sit there and work the paint in bit by bit. You know, just getting it coated real good. And it takes 1 or 2 coats usually, depending on how deep the rust pits are. If you got a lot of rust pits, you want to use a primer surfacer, which actually will fill in some of those pits, or at least smooth their edges so they don't look as bad in the finished paint job. You know, and like that, get at the levers and the globe lift. These wire parts are really tricky because you got all these sides to them, and they angles, and you got to just get under there, and you know, end, top, bottom, side, middle, in between, all over. So it takes a little bit of extra time to properly cover these areas. The biggest thing here is to get this lantern coated with a coat of paint so it doesn't surface rust. It is more high humidity today. The paint's going to dry slow. We've got big rainstorms coming, so I want to get the paint on here to protect the work that has been done so far and to prevent any further deterioration and or rusting. Yeah, I can definitely see pinholes in there. If I shine my flashlight from the inside, I bet I'll see what looks like the Milky Way on the bottom of this doggone lantern. There's quite a few little pinholes, so but pour 15 will do the job on that. You just got a worker in there good. Patience and just taking your time and looking, because there's all these little beads on the tubes and the crimps and everything else that just hides nooks and crannies that need to be coated with paint. Alright, this one looks pretty good for the first coat, so we'll just hang it right here on the drying rack and let it dry.